Hello, writerly people. It's time for my weekly writing video, and today I am going to start by showing you a couple of my treasures that I normally keep on the shelf that is right behind me. And the first is, well, they're kind of together. This is a little turtle made out of cave ice, and we got that back when I was 16 years old. The family took a trip around the United States and we stopped at a cave. I think it was in the Dakotas area. There was a cave, and they had these little cave ice figurines for sale. My mother bought this one, and it sat on the entryway table in our home for years, and for some reason I ended up with it, and it survived the fire. Big thing. I had a fire in 2020, and this little turtle is a survivor for some reason, for which I am grateful. And then this is also a photograph that I keep back there. I don't know if you can see it, but I'm trying. Okay, this is a photograph of my mother. This is actually the last photograph I took of her. We were in Texas. She lived in Rockport, Texas. And my mother lived in Rockport. I lived in Idaho, and she wanted me to come down there and see her, and she wanted to sign over her car for me because I hadn't had a car for 3 years. I was flat broke way back then, and I couldn't afford a car in any way, shape, or form, so she wanted to give me her car. And I went to see her, and we took a little trip to a nearby nature preserve, and I saw an alligator, and I saw some javelinas, and that's about all. But I took my mom's picture while we were at the nature preserve. And on the way home, after I left her, I stopped at a gas station and bought this little photo frame. That's why it's got like the Star of Texas on the cross. So I like keeping that where I can see it. Love my mom. She was a very creative person, and she didn't really, she didn't follow her art. Now, she was good at art. She had done a couple of pictures with charcoal and pastels, and they looked fantastic. It was beautiful work, but she abandoned that idea and she went for sewing. So she was an amazing seamstress. She made the quilt top that goes on my bed. She made a lot of other things. She made a lot of dolls, things that she could sell because they were so beautifully and professionally done. I think everyone needs a creative outlet. And I know as a booktuber, you could say that making booktube videos is your creative outlet. And that would be true. But we as readers are consumers of somebody else's creativity. And I absolutely love reading, of course, but I also have a need to be a creator. I want to be a creator of writing, not just a reader of writing. And I think everyone has a desire to be creative in some way. So I've been reading, as you know, I've been reading this book, A Writer's Book of Days. I read a few pages, ideally read a few pages, write a little bit. I have not been doing very good at the writing part, again, this week. And I keep telling myself I have to show up at the page, show up at the page. So yesterday I did show up at the page, and I wrote a story, not knowing where it was going. I was writing to a prompt, and I wrote the story Anyhow, not knowing at all where it might end, thinking, well, a lot of times when I'm writing, sort of the magical ending comes up halfway through, or somehow it's revealed to me as to where this story should end. So I have relied on that a lot as a writer. I guess you could say I'm one of the seat of your pants type writers, not one that plots everything out in advance. And it's worked remarkably well for me most of the time, but sometimes it doesn't. And yesterday was one of those times because, I like to write flash fiction that is less than 500 words. That's approximately, in my notebook, it's 2 pages. And this time it didn't end at 500 words, and I went on and filled a whole third page and a half of the next page before I could finally find an ending to this story. And I have not typed it up yet, so I can't read you that one. But I do have another story to read you that I wrote about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. Now, another thing I wanted to talk to you about today, I couldn't decide whether I wanted to talk to you about being a consumer versus being a creator of writing. Or the other topic was critique groups. I have a lot to say about critique groups. In fact, on my blog, there's an article about how to form a critique group, and it sort of gives my philosophy in there. But I will talk about that next week, I think. I just read a section of this book that brought that topic to mind, and I have strong feelings about groups that writers join, because having been a writer for a long time, I have joined a lot of different groups, and I know what works for me and what doesn't work for me. So we'll talk about that next time. Right now I'm going to read the story that I chose for today, because I don't have very many stories to choose from, and I did not want to choose a memoir, so it had to be a story. I had to choose between one that I wrote just a couple weeks ago and one that I wrote in the long distant past. I'm not sure exactly when I did write that one. It's called The Microchip. Wrote it in 2011. So I'm going to go with the one that I wrote this recently, written in on June 6th. It's called The Dream. While the world sleeps, the dreamland world comes to life. This is a place we usually are unaware of, deep in subconscious thought, but we can't avoid the true reality when we're sleeping. All those walls we construct to block out the truth are removed when we're on the other side of consciousness. Tessa jumped from her bed into a tree where fruits hung nearby. She wasn't hungry, but was attracted to their bright and red gleaming coloring. Then she noticed the extraordinary deep green leaves beside and behind them. Joy illuminated her face and flooded her heart. She noticed a distant castle on a hill. A dirt road led to it. This was not a beautiful or attractive castle. It was more like a fortress, close in color to the earth. As she slid out of the tree, she saw people walking on the unpaved road, one way or the other. She wasn't sure which way to go and did not ask any of the people what their mission was. She decided to walk uphill toward the castle. It was an attractive force calling her closer. Still, she felt some trepidation, wondering if this were some sort of trap. A man passed by on the other side of the road, going the other direction, and noticed her, lifting his hat and smiling in a suspicious, smirking way. She saw he continued on, so she was not fearful of him. She kept thinking she should ask someone what was going on in that castle, but timidity kept her from speaking, so she walked along in silence. So did everyone else. The silence was nearly intimidating, though it was at times interrupted by a cheerful birdsong. Eventually, she reached the castle gate where people lined up, waiting for entry. A soldier at the gate spoke to each. looking into his book and sometimes writing something in there. It seemed that most people got to go inside while others, quite a few really, were turned away. These were the ones going in the opposite direction on that dirt road. Tessa patiently waited her turn to talk to the soldier at the gate. It took a long time, but eventually she was there. The soldier asked for her name. Tessa Rogers, she said. What is in your book? Tessa, he said, looking through the large pages. It is a book of names. Why? She asked. Names of the living and of the damned, he replied, and here is your name. Tessa burst into tears. Which am I? She asked. Am I safe? You are allowed entry, he replied. Tessa gasped. Is that good? You'll have to go inside to see, he said with a smile, and with that he turned away to talk to the next person in line. Tessa felt the panic, took a firm step through the gate, and woke up. I know, it's kind of a letdown not to get to know what's beyond that, but as I was reading it just now, it said to me at the very end that I was like that person in a panic, stepping through the gate of writing again, which is kind of scary to expose yourself, your inner thoughts in a story. And I think the writing is very difficult for me. It's like going up the hill into that castle. I don't know what's going to be there. I do know that I feel drawn toward that castle. Let's say it's the writing castle. And perhaps something will wake up. I want to be that person who is a creator of writing, not just a consumer of writing. I know you could call Stephen King one of the ultimate creators of writing, yet he, in his book on writing, recommended that we all read as much as we can. And I have always taken his advice, although he was never one of my favorite authors simply because I don't read his books. I'm not into horror and fantasy, just not for me. There are a few books that he's written that I thought were okay. I think I've just read 2 of his books on writing and The Green Mile. So I don't know much about his writing, but I do know that I took his writing advice and I've been reading a lot of books. And I think it's a benefit to me as a writer, but it's time for me to step through the gate of the castle and find out what's in there. And so that's my story for today, and just relating it back. I think that being a consumer of writing is wonderful, but being a creator of writing is a challenge that I cannot ignore. And so that's the direction I'm going in. And I'm never going to stop reading books as long as I can read books. Funny thing about my mom, when I was there visiting her in 2017, I noticed a book next to her chair. She was living in an assisted living home. And there was a book next to her chair, and I said, Mom, how wonderful that you're still reading. And she looked at me like I was crazy, like, of course I'm still reading. Well, I think a lot of older people maybe lose the ability to read, but my mother certainly hadn't. She read until the very end of her life, because after I left her, she actually had a stroke a few weeks later and died a week after that. So she lived less than a month after I saw her that time in Texas when we went to the wildlife preserve. And another thing I'll tell you about my mom, when I was with her in Texas that time in 2017, I drove her around quite a bit. It was her car, but I was the driver. And it's a good thing because I think she was like seeing things that weren't there. A couple of times she said that she saw something in the middle of the street and it wasn't there. And while we were at the wildlife preserve, she saw a man on the other side of the parking lot, and there was no man over there. It was some pipes sticking out of the ground, so she just wasn't seeing clearly enough to drive, and I was driving for her. And she gave me her car. Anyhow, when we got out of the wildlife preserve, we were pretty thirsty. And I decided that we were going to stop at a gas station and get a couple bottles of water to alleviate our thirst. But when I went in there, Mom said, "I don't want water, I want root beer." And so I thought that was kind of interesting because I was kind of like a purist, haven't had soda in years, and I didn't want to have soda. I wanted to have pure spring water if I could get it. And Mom, at the age of 85, wanted just a root beer. So I got it for her. And I think it was exciting for her to be able to get out of the assisted living home and drink something that she wanted. And we also went to Dairy Queen. She wanted to go to Dairy Queen, not for anything reasonable to eat, but she wanted a little blizzard. So we each got a blizzard, and that was like another thing that I would normally not ever eat. But it made me happy that my mom wanted to do whatever she wanted to do at the end of her life. It was her decision. If she wanted to eat sugar, she was going to. And so I've always remembered that. So I try not to deprive myself too much because my mom taught me something that day. So that's about all I have to say. I think I better stop this narrative now. I just want to thank you so much for coming by and listening to me talk. And if you have a chance and you do some writing and you're a booktube person or a writerly person of any kind, try to make a video. Why not? I would love to see more people making writing videos. Of course, Booktube expects Booktube videos, and I have to say that my writing videos do not get as many hits as my Booktube videos were getting as of late. Nevertheless, I'm going to carry on with them because that is where my heart is taking me. Talk to you later.